everyone. Welcome again to Elevating Your Life. I am happy to be here with you today and happy to share another fantastic guest. We have with us today Dr. Helen McKibben, and she is a Washington, D.C. area therapist with a doctorate in psychology and 35 years of clinical experience. Her approach to psychotherapy includes a study of the body and the brain, plus the connection between the two. Dr. McKibben created the technique of dropping to the blank screen after noticing two recurring needs among her clients. First was the need to learn how to manage triggered feelings, and second was Dr. McKibben's need to understand why her clients felt the way they did. Her new book is Drop, Making Great Decisions, Use Neuroscience to Retrain Your Brain and Make Better Life Choices. Just a fantastic book. I really enjoyed it. First off, Helen, thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
I am so happy to have you. Let's start out with maybe share a bit more of your background and what prompted you to write this book.
In my college years, I became interested in the connection with emotion and the body, and I studied mind-body medicine. But what really enthralled me was the neuroscience classes I also took in college. So while people were developing methodologies for meditation or TM, I was going more the medical route and really trying to find out how the brain worked emotionally and incorporate that in my work. I went on to graduate school and to getting my doctorate in 2008, where I really had a fun opportunity to test out all my theories and the ways that I had developed a method to work with people in terms of how the brain already works emotionally. So what you're going to hear from me is not mindfulness or meditation or CBT or psychoanalysis. It's studying how to give people an effective, simple method to tap into the brain in the way it's already designed to work emotionally. And that is my goal. As you mentioned before, my goal in beginning to fulfill people's need for a method out there, because I think there is, it was to have two goals. To not only give myself, but give them the understanding of why they were doing what they're doing, because so many people are relieved when they find out that there's not something wrong with them, more or less, that they have learned to do what they're currently doing. And my second goal is once they establish why they're doing what they're doing, the things in their life that aren't working for them, my goal was to implement them teaching a method on how to change what they were unhappy with in their lives, dating, getting to sleep, dealing with difficult people, performance, any number of things, and giving them a method to change the configuration on the current neuron track of what they were doing to something new that worked better. And this is a self-reliant method. I never tell people what to do in my book. I never tell them what to say. So when they are triggered and they're doing things that are ineffective, they don't have to go up in their head and say, well, what did that Helen say in the book? Or what did that podcast say? Or what did that person tell me to do? I am building a totally self-reliant method of getting them to tap into the brain and use how they feel in the moment. And every time they felt that way before memory retrieval, to reach new conclusions of what to say or do for themselves. So they don't spend their time beating themselves up or criticizing them. They realize where they learn to do what they're doing, and I give them an opportunity to tap in their brain, learn to listen to what they hear in themselves instead of me for their decision and resolution of what to do differently.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm really happy to present a method that people can use self-reliantly instead of trying to remember what someone said to say or do as before. And there's a reason that doesn't work. There's a lot of wonderful podcasts and neurologists and therapists out there, all giving us methods to resolve feelings either physically and the autonomic nervous system or emotionally or cognitively. Those are out there. But I want to give them a method that's self-reliant, that they start noticing that if they're up in their cognition, talking themselves into breathing or relaxing, or talking themselves into changing the way they're thinking to something else, if they're using cognition to instruct their body or their brain, it's a difficulty for this method because what my clients need is a brain free and clear to do this. Use the brain and the way it's designed to work. Because if you're triggered by a person or situation or thoughts, and you don't have a way to recognize it, which is lighting up physically, that's a lot of methods use that, but you have to shift and notice where you're lighting up physically, which stops you from doing the old behavior immediately, the old reaction immediately. You drop to what we call the blank screen, and you know what that does? It activates the brain's memory recall. And so the brain is already designed to use how we feel in the moment if you don't avoid the feeling. And every time you've felt that way before, to configure new ideas of what you could do differently. And once the individual listens to their ideas, not me, or remember what someone said, listen to what they're hearing in themselves after their brain configures current and past memory and feeling recall, current situation, past situation recall, the brain configures, and the brain spits out words or ideas of what you could do differently so you don't feel that way. The crowning glory of the method is once they decide what to say or do differently and give it a try, that action of making a decision completely resolves the feeling. And so they don't think about it afterwards over and over again, second guessing themselves. And in terms of the physiology, when they drop to the blank screen, it resolves the autonomic nervous system that people usually notice build up and they do a yoga class or breathing or relaxing. Well, you do it in the moment, quick response to autonomic nervous system resolution. You configure of what to say or do differently, make a decision of what you'll say or do. And once you make that decision and give it a try, it resolves not only the physiology of the feeling from coming back, but the emotion from coming back, re-triggering you. Now, many people would say, well, what if I use your method and I can't get to those words or make a decision yet? Then built into the method is this wonderful second option, is if you're in a situation that triggers you, a person, a situation, criticizing yourself, going into public speaking, trying to get to sleep, you'll notice you light up. If you shift and notice where you're lighting up, you stop listening to that critical voice. You stop overthinking that's preventing you from getting to sleep, for etc. Thinking about the person who's bothering you. If you shift, drop to the blank screen, the brain configures. Once you listen to your ideas and pick one and make a decision, it works when you come up with a decision. Now, what if you can't come up with a decision? Then afterwards, the brain's going to have you keep thinking about it. I should have said this. I should have said this, thinking about the situation or person or thing that triggered you. So when it comes up again in the thought process, instead of spinning out and trying to be perfect, We again shift, notice where we're lit up. We drop to the blank screen long enough for the brain to configure ideas of what to say or do differently. And once you pick an idea and make a decision of what you'll do differently next time that the same thing happens, it completely resolves the feeling for the brain, and the brain doesn't have to keep bringing it up over and over again. And there's no secondary guessing yourself that attaches itself. So it's a resolution in the triggered feeling, one triggering feeling, one situation at a time, all day long, keeping the autonomic nervous system at neutral and keeping feelings resolved so they don't keep recreating themselves in your thought process and stressing you.
I love it. I love it. So being able to go to that blank screen, that just changes everything, doesn't it?
It does, but just like if I were Tiger Woods or a celebrity and got a new golf coach, and they said, we're going to teach you a new golf swing. Forget the 30 years and the way you've been doing it before, because our neuron tracks and the way we do things are learned growing up. It takes practice. So we break down the steps into notice your trigger, shift, notice where, drop to the blank screen, listen to your configuring, and then decide what to say or do. That eventually becomes automatic and unconscious. But after it's practiced many times, and the great thing about this book is you'll find yourself not just remembering what I said, but practicing it constantly every time you're triggered to feel during your 24-hour day. Those practices become the go-to because the brain is going to adjust to or advise you with what ways you end up feeling better. It's going to go to that solution over what used to feel really difficult and not let things work very well for you in your life. So the brain is so beautifully designed. We want to use it the way it's designed, not have to overthink ourselves and listen to what the brain puts together from past, present, current feeling, and its ideas. I have a great example for you.
Yes, thank you.
Have you ever walked away from a situation and said, why didn't I listen to myself? I knew this was going to happen.
Yes.
Those are the words the brain puts together. It's your knowing. And you don't get to those words if you don't notice you're triggered, don't go through how you feel, and every time that's happened before, and come up with some ideas and pick an idea and implement doing it differently. So those words the brain puts together, some people learn to listen to them in their upbringing, and some people don't. When a child has a feeling or a reaction or an upset or an idea of something they want to do, it's dependent on if it's reinforced, if that knowing, if the brain and the words it's putting out there are reinforced by the parenting experience, then they go into adulthood trusting themselves, how they feel, what they observe, and what they want to do. If for whatever reason, we never blame parents, by the way, because they parent us the way they're. But if it's not reinforced, how they feel or what they observe or what they want to do, then I now give them a method to go back and redo that part of the upbringing where they might not have gotten a lot of reinforcement. Sometimes that's because of a parent. It's sometimes because there's not a parent available. The circumstances that reinforce the child going into adulthood, listening to themselves, or early development. Well, the brain can change. It can add neurons and different ways of doing things very easily. So that practice reinforces adding a new configuration to the old neuron tracks and doing things differently until you're comfortable.
Wow. That is fascinating.
It is, because there are a lot of wonderful methods out there. But if you think about it, once you've implemented the method or the neuroscience or the new tech machine that does neurons in your brain, it gets feelings to a manageable size. But if they're not resolved in the brain by you making a different decision, they keep coming back. Let me give you a great example. Have you ever had something that every 5 years it comes up and you cringe when you think about what you did? Oh, why did I do that? The reason the memory keeps coming up because the brain hasn't resolved it because you never made a decision of what you do differently. So here's a great way to use this method. I think of something from the past, it lights me up. I shift and go through the process as my brain configures everything it knows about what happened back then with how I'm feeling in the moment. It spits out ideas of what you could say or do, your instincts. So you don't feel that way again. And once you make a decision of what you'll say or do, if that instant, that memory that you keep thinking about ever happens again, it resolves it for the brain. So every 5 years, it stops coming up because it's resolved in the brain because you made a decision. Making a decision resolves feelings, not just these wonderful techniques out there to reduce feelings autonomically, physically, or emotionally. They will remain permanent what they're working on if they also listen to their own words, not mine, theirs, and make decisions. So it's a lifestyle where you don't have to spin in your head. Every time you make a decision, you don't think about it afterwards. So you get back to being in the moment and what you were enjoying with your children or your life or focusing on.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that this method is very helpful to people.
Yes. So if we can take that memory and instead of, beating ourselves up, make a
Yes.
decision of, if this happens again, this is what I would do. This is what I would do different. Wow.
You can. But what makes the method of dropping to the blank screen so important is the memories don't get triggered if you don't drop to the blank screen. And the physiology of the feeling, the increased heart rate, doesn't go back to normal if you don't go to the drop to the blank screen. And you have to resolve both when it comes to how you feel, the physiology of the feeling and the emotion.
Yes. So
So people who don't
someone,
drop to the blank
yeah,
screen don't get memory retrieval involved in what they're deciding. They just keep thinking the same thing and doing the same thing over and over again.
yes. So what would you say are the most important steps for us to take to get to that blank screen?
Marvelous question. How do you get to a blank screen if you don't know what it feels like to be in the blank screen? And how do you know to go drop to the blank screen if you don't know when you're triggered to feel? The brain's first response to being triggered by people, situations, thoughts, difficulties is the brain lights us up physically. Increased heart rate, unique to you, rolling your eyes, wanting to walk out of a room, unique to you. There are physical reactions in certain areas in your body unique to you that let you know you've been triggered by a person or a situation or thoughts. First thing you have to do is notice where you tend to light up. Do I hold my breath? Does my heart rate go up? Because that's the cue. Unconsciously, you're going to catch it to then drop all the way to the blank screen to go through that feeling as the brain's configuring and then listen to those words or ideas to make a decision from. So the first and most important thing is knowing you're even triggered by a person, situation, or your thoughts, and then go through and use your life experience of what worked before and what hasn't to make a new decision.
That is so fascinating. Wow.
And there's fabulous books and neurologists and texts and techniques out there. And what I say to people is if you're triggered and you drop to the blank screen and your memory recall says meditation or mindfulness really works for me, and it's the idea to implement it at that point you're triggered, that's great. You're using your memory retrieval. But the last step of then you have to make a decision based on what you hear after you de-stress yourself with the methodology and then see what you hear. So making a decision resolves the feelings or the triggering situation or person for the brain.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the brain, we've made the decision and that changes.
Right. Let me give you a great example. Let's
Yeah.
say we have an athlete and they're on a team and they walk into an ice arena and all of a sudden they're triggered. They have memories of the ref that was unfair before, the people shouting at them in the stands, or they have the memory that they lost the game. If they don't shift and drop through all those memories, their autonomic nervous system is going to be heightened. And they're not, because of that physical buildup and them not dropping to the blank screen, their brain isn't going to work well to configure how the puck's coming at them and what they know to do about that athletic response to the puck, because they're up in here spinning with anxiety, worrying about losing again, or is that same ref here, instead of being at the blank screen and letting their brain notify their body automatically and unconsciously on how to approach the athletic feat.
Wow.
So everyone can use this.
Yeah.
Athletes, performers,
Yes.
people who love people in their family, but I'm the one that always has to listen to them or fix their problems. It's reversing all those patterns to what you really want to be like and giving other people the read that you're not cutting off of them, but that you have limits. And if they're going to trigger people, they might have to find somebody else and turn around and start respecting you.
Yes. Because we can be so triggered by someone
Everything.
else's words to us or behavior and what's around us. And that's got us up
And
here. But we can go down into that blank screen.
yes, and the noticing where you light up gives the individual in your audience the ability to immediately notice they're triggered right when it happens, rather than letting things build up for 10 hours and then trying to go through and resolve the feeling. So
Yes.
it gives them an immediate way when they're triggered, not 10 hours later, to resolve the feeling
Yeah.
physically and emotionally.
Oh, this is so fascinating. Your book is so wonderful. And I had I loved in the book you mentioned something about how our brain guides what we eat. How does that work?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, very interesting. Here's the neurology, here's the psychology, here's everything together. First of all, when we have areas in our body and our brain alerts us if our liquid level gets too low or if our calcium level gets too low, the brain, our fabulous brain, starts automatically giving us cravings for something to drink or for calcium. Okay, that's the first thing that happens. Now, what do I choices and memory recall get involved? If you notice you're thirsty and you pause with yourself and you are also getting a craving for calcium, the brain puts together, oh, well, I used to really love chocolate milk when I was a child. So you walk into the 7-Eleven or the Wawa or whatever, and we go, oh, I'm going to get that. Also, you're dropped in the moment. You remember, well, I'm a bit on, watching the calorie intake. So when you're standing at the cooler to get the chocolate milk, you pick the low fat. So it is childhood preferences, chocolate milk, what the brain is triggering us to crave, and preferences of how we feel in the moment and what we're doing with our body. So past, present, and the brain working together to be sure we ingest calcium and liquids. If you don't, you get in trouble because you ignore, you get home about you're chugging a gallon of chocolate milk when you could have satisfied that craving with immediately.
Yeah.
So even more important is the brain lights us up when we're triggered. Well, the brain lights us up physically in our unique areas when there's something we need to listen to. Remember pregnancy? The old jokes about sardines or, ice cream. Well,
Yes,
guess the
yes.
brain is having those mothers crave calcium and salt because they're being deplenished by being pregnant.
Yeah.
So if they don't listen to those cravings and follow through with what they, want, well, I like tuna as a kid, not sardines, so I'm in a tuna. See, all the brain collectively works with your past experience and what you decide in the moment. If they don't listen to themselves, if they ignore that knowing their brain is put together for decisions, they get in trouble.
It's just so amazing and so fascinating to learn this. My gosh. Helen, we have just a couple minutes left in the show. What
Okay.
last message do you want to share with everybody before we go?
Well, I really appreciate people joining us and hearing about a self-reliant method that may help them listen to themselves over situations and people. It's great. The other thing is I wanted to introduce my website, which has a lot of more information about how I work, and it will give people, if you're interested in purchasing the book, ways to do that. I also have a blog and a place where anybody can communicate with me on the website. And the website is www.helenmckibben.com. And that's spelled McKibben. You'll also find a way to connect with me through email professionally on the site. So if people are really interested in the method and everything that's available to them, and then all the reviews of doctors who reviewed my book or writers and authors who've reviewed my book. There's some really interesting reviews and kind of responding in the way you are today to, wow, this is really new and interesting, to let me know more about it. And there's some nice reviews to read as well on the book page.
Yeah, your book, the Drop Making Great Decision is, it is, I read a lot of books. It is really unique and fascinating, Helen. It really is.
Okay. Yeah,
I-
I'm hoping it's
Great.
my life's work. So, and it's out there for other people, so I hope they can use it.
Well, thank you so much for writing it, and thank you for all that you share with others and help us. And I am just thrilled to have you on the show and share you and meet you today, Helen.
Okay. Very nice meeting you as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, dear. Everyone out there, love, hugs, and blessings. Helen, love, hugs, and blessings. Have a fantastic day.